In the 5th century, the Roman Empire would meet its demise at the hands of Germanic invaders, who sacked the Eternal City and closed the final chapter of the near-millennium-long history of Roman civilization. This narrative, however, is a lie, as not only did the empire's eastern and arguably better half survive for another millennium, but according to various historians, the legacy of Roman civilization would be well and alive centuries after its fall, with it being preserved and even improved upon by the 3 civilizations that succeeded it in the Mediterranean. The oldest of these successors to the unified Roman Empire was the Eastern Romans, more commonly known as the Byzantines. While their Western counterpart would succumb to barbarian invasion, the East would remain a powerhouse in the Mediterranean for centuries to come. Its capital, Constantinople, was home to people from all across the Roman world, ranging from Armenians to Copts, Assyrians, Jews, and various other ethnicities, with this immense diversity being reflective of the broader empire. But the most dominant of the empire's ethnicities were the Greeks. This became especially apparent over the 7th century, when Latin, Rome's official language since the Republic, was supplanted by Greek, just one part of the increasing Hellenization of the empire, making it ever more Greek in language, culture, ethnicity, and religious denomination, putting greater emphasis on the Greco in the empire's Greco-Roman identity. Still, the Byzantines continued many Roman traditions. The age-old Roman Senate, for example, existed in Constantinople, at times even wielding great influence. The Roman emperors were still known as Caesar and ruled absolutely over secular affairs, along with exerting significant influence over the Christian Church. Above all, the law of the land was still the Roman one, albeit not without some alterations over the centuries. The most famous of these came in the 6th century, under Emperor Justinian, the Corpus Juris Civilis, or by its more known name, the Justinian Code. Its purpose was to codify and streamline the numerous and sometimes contradictory laws of the empire into a simplified and cohesive body of law fit for the contemporary era, which meant eliminating a portion of the edicts of previous Caesars. This would be only one of the many transformations the Byzantines underwent over the centuries, ultimately leading to them looking quite different from the Roman Empire most people imagine. The famed legions of Rome were replaced with heavy cavalry in the form of cataphracts, the provinces reorganized into themes, merging both civil and military power in the hands of governors, and intellectuals often pursuing theological matters over philosophy, at times to the detriment of the empire's well-being. These changes were so great that some would consider the Byzantines a completely distinct entity from the classical Roman Empire. However, the Byzantines were not a direct copy of them, but rather what the empire evolved into during the medieval era, doing what the Romans did best, adapting to the times for their survival. Part of this changing with the times would be the empire losing most of its territories in the 7th century, being reduced to Anatolia and the Balkans for much of its remaining existence. This string of rapid and irreversible defeats would come at the hands of the nascent Islamic Empire, which, beginning in the early 7th century under the Rashidun caliphs, would not only conquer over a third of all lands once Roman, but also Rome's greatest rival, the Persians, creating an empire that stretched from Spain to the Indus Valley by 720. It has been argued by some that these unprecedented conquests shut the door on antiquity in the Near East. However, that's not entirely the case. In the early years of Islamic rule, the formerly Roman territories remained virtually unchanged. The administrators and patriarchs of the region were still Christian Syrians and Copts, who now answered to rulers in Medina and later Damascus, instead of Constantinople. Demographically, Arabs and Muslims made up only a minority of the population for centuries afterward. This was further reinforced by the numerous civil wars fought during the 1st century of Islam, with these wars fought over the title of Caliph, which over time became virtually identical to the title of emperor. As the Islamic Empire matured under the Abbasid dynasty, it began to take on a more Persian character in its governance and court rituals, in contrast to the more Roman-inspired administration of the previous dynasty. Yet despite these differences, the empire was still clearly the product of a Mediterranean world once ruled by Rome. Its architecture blended a variety of styles, including Roman, into the distinct and iconic Islamic design. Culturally, the famed Roman bathhouses found a second life within the Islamic world, as the religion's emphasis on ritual purification made them common across its vast territories. However, by far the most significant continuity between the Caliphate and classical antiquity was the translation movement. After the Abbasid Revolution in 750 AD, the caliphs in their new capital of Baghdad took a serious interest in the vast body of knowledge found in the lands they had conquered. This included philosophical, scientific, astronomical, mathematical, and medical works. The Caliphate not only collected these texts, but also funded research across these various fields. Of all the texts gathered, those of the ancient Greeks were by far the most favored. Over the next several centuries, the works of Plato, Galen, Hippocrates, Aristotle, and many other classical thinkers would be translated into Arabic. These works were studied in institutions of higher learning, debated and critiqued in the halls of the caliphs, and finally adapted to the contemporary world, ushering in one of humanity's greatest eras of intellectual flourishing. Witnessing the invention of algebra by al-Khwarizmi, the rapid advancement of medicine by Ibn Sina, and a pre-industrial green revolution in Muslim Iberia, along with numerous other advancements for humanity. To the north of Al-Andalus lay the middle child of the post-Roman world, Western Europe, who in due time would create a golden age to match that of their eastern neighbor. In the aftermath of the Germanic tribes' conquest of Western Rome, they each established kingdoms: the Visigothic, Lombard, Anglo-Saxon, and the most notable, the Kingdom of the Franks. Rather than fully replace Roman culture, the new rulers hybridized it with their own, drawing heavily on Roman architecture, law, language, and religion in their new regimes, made all the more easy as they had been partially Romanized through centuries of contact with the Romans. As stated previously, the Kingdom of the Franks was the most notable Germanic kingdom, as by the early 8th century they had established the largest kingdom in Western Europe. Made all the more significant when the Visigothic kingdom was conquered by the Caliphate in 718. While the Germanic tribes had not sought to erase the legacy of ancient Rome, Roman knowledge had gradually faded in step with the region's diminishing economy, with literacy rates insufficient to keep them alive. At this pivotal moment, the Frankish ruler Charlemagne would launch the Carolingian Renaissance, an effort to revitalize the literature, architecture, and language of ancient Rome. The era would see the establishment of schools and libraries inspired by the Greco-Roman style, which taught and housed the great literary works of Rome in Latin, playing a key role in its preservation alongside the Catholic Church. This Renaissance would be the first of two smaller ones that would plant the seeds of the renowned Renaissance of the 14th century, which, with the diffusion of knowledge from the Islamic world, would see the full-scale revitalization of the Greco-Roman legacy in medieval Europe, producing great artists and thinkers such as Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Machiavelli, as well as numerous others, with their funding and support coming from wealthy patrons like the Medici family, in addition to the Catholic Church, whose scribes had helped preserve the Latin language and the works and ideas written in them throughout the centuries. The Renaissance would help lay the foundations for the Enlightenment, a movement that sought to improve the human condition through reason coupled with empiricism, and in doing so, surpass the achievements of ancient Rome, most notably its living standards and representative form of government. The Enlightenment would be so successful that by 1792, over 3,000 miles from any lands the Romans once stepped foot on, a Capitol building, like those of antiquity, would be built by a republic modeled after the Roman one.